Good morning and welcome to the National Newspaper Publishers Association's Let It Be Known on this Thursday, February 10th, 2022. According to the nonprofit Sentencing Project, 1 in 16 African Americans of voting age is disenfranchised, a rate 3.7 times greater than that of non-African Americans. Over 6.2% of the adult African American population is disenfranchised compared to 1.7% of the non-African American population. This morning, we bring you the case of Pamela Moses, who just received a 6-year prison sentence, not for casting a ballot, but attempting to cast a ballot. She registered to vote and was deemed to have illegally done so. We discussed this morning with Darrell Jones, a civil rights attorney with the Transformation Justice Coalition, and journalist Barrington Salmon. But first, the headlines this morning to get your day started. On July 6th, a 3-car accident at the 65th Street Expressway and Lemon Hill Road in Sacramento, California, left 3 people injured and started a nightmare for the family of Michelle Vickers, who is 29 years old. She was hurt in the crash and hospitalized for about a month. Her family says 3 weeks after the crash, she was charged with reckless driving. But Vickers has been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Her brother Ryan says, and her illness led to her to miss a court date, which led to her arrest in December and landed her in isolation inside the Sacramento County main jail, despite having no previous criminal record. Today, Ryan Vickers says his younger sister is at UC Davis Medical Center in a catatonic state, diagnosed with COVID-19 and has multiple broken ribs. She's being administered medicine and nourishment through a tube in her nose, and no one has been able to explain what happened to her. Vickers says, I believe something happened inside that jail, something that they are trying to cover up. He says, I don't know if it was staff. I don't know if it was another inmate. She didn't go to jail with broken ribs, but she left out with broken ribs. Sacramento County Sheriff's Office spokesman Sergeant Rodney Grassman declined to comment on what happened to Vickers, referring questions to the county's correctional health spokeswoman, Samantha Mott, who cited privacy issues in declining to explain what happened to the inmate. She says, we can confirm that Michelle Vickers was in custody from December 3rd, 2021 to February 3rd, 2022. Any health care an inmate may or may not receive while in custody is protected under the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act and cannot be released without signed patient authorization or a court order. Michelle Vickers' mental state appears to have complicated the handling of her case. Her brother says the family tried to bail her out following her arrest, but that sheriff's officials told them she was not eligible because she was on a so-called 5150 hold used to temporarily detain suspects for psychiatric testing. She spent her 29th birthday and Christmas in jail, and her family has been unable to see her since her arrest. It's a case that bears watching out in Sacramento, and we will continue to keep that case in front here at the Black Press of America. Also in the news this morning, Congress has passed the Postal Service Reform Act of 2021. Bipartisan legislation lawmakers said would help the U.S. Postal Service save money, balance its budget, and improve service. The measure, which passed by a margin of 342 to 92, is seen by many as a critical reform that would repeal the pre-funded mandate, a rule passed in 2006 which gutted the Postal Service's financial independence. Reportedly, decades of failing mail use have turned the Postal Service into a perpetual financial loser, and the pre-funding requirement has accounted for $152.8 billion of its $206.4 billion in liabilities. The legislation would clear $57 billion of that amount and save the agency another $50 billion over the next decade. Importantly, lawmakers said the bill would help to modernize the Postal Service, ensure faster and more dependable deliveries, increase oversight and accountability, protect rural newspapers, and ensure the stability of this critical American institution. So The post office situation, again, is something else that we've been watching. Of course, we all remember the 2016 election and also the census, in which the post office played vital roles in both. So this morning, voting rights is on the radar again. Pamela Moses, a Black woman, was sentenced to 6 years and 1 day in prison for trying to register to vote in 2019. Pamela, a Black Lives Matter activist, said she is the victim of complicated voting laws in Tennessee that appear to confuse even election officials. Prosecutors in Memphis said that accidentally or not, Pamela broke the law, but Moses and her lawyer say election officials gave her advice that they later corrected while she was seeking to have her voting rights restored. Voting rights activists say Pamela Moses' lengthy sentence underscores racial disparities in the criminal justice system when it comes to voting fraud cases, especially since white men who have been charged in more straightforward instances of voting fraud have received probation or just days of imprisonment. Let's discuss this morning with Darrell Jones, a civil rights attorney with the Transformational Justice Coalition, and journalist Barrington Salmon. Also joining us is the president and CEO of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, Dr. Benjamin Chavis. Good morning, all.
Good morning.
Good morning.
And good morning, Dr. Chavis.
Good morning, Stacey Brown, and to our guests. Thank you for giving us the headlines, and the subject of voting rights continues, that we need to fight for our voting rights and not give up anything to those that try to suppress our vote.
Yeah, absolutely. And this morning, Pamela Moses, not only did they suppress her vote, but Attorney Jones and Barrington, she's in prison now. And Barrington, I know you did a lot of work, a lot of research on this. Let's start with you. And what have you found with this story?
For a long time, I've been saying that since 2019, 2020, with COVID and George Floyd, that this is revelation time, that we're seeing with these lying eyes, as they always say, the more of the egregious nature of the so-called criminal justice system and other institutions. It defies imagination. Miss Moses is behind bars because they said her probation officer and her and some elections officials misinterpreted what her status was, because they said that she had gotten notification that she was still on probation. When she checked, they said no, she wasn't. And when she went to the elections people, they basically gave her the green light to go ahead to register, which she did. And then it was like, oops. What I really don't understand is why the judge has chosen to give her to put the entire onus of the situation on her, and not sought to hold the election officials and the probation officer responsible for her being in the position she's in. It's infuriating. It's maddening, but it's real. That's the way the system works.
Yeah, and Attorney Jones, obviously civil rights attorney, you've seen a lot of this. In this case, what's happening here?
You know, it's really an interesting situation here, Stacey, and it's a sad situation, because what we see happening is what happens around the country. In every state you go to, every felony disenfranchisement law, every opportunity for someone that's been previously convicted of a felony to regain their right to vote, they're all different. They're all over the place. And none of them are completely explained what's going on. And Pamela Moses is one of those cases that lifts that up. You know, we got to remember that the original purpose behind the felony disenfranchisement law came out post-slavery during that first Reconstruction, where they wanted to stop Black people, from Black men at that point, from being able to vote. So they would conjure up these loitering laws, and any white person can ask you, do you have a job type of law, and then enslave you, well, not enslave you, but imprison you, and then use that to take away your vote. Well, this is where we still are at this point in time. What Pamela Moses' case represents is precisely that this is a situation where they have never clearly explained to her that her right to vote was being interfered with, that she could not vote by the laws of Tennessee. Now, understand this. If she was in Maryland, she could vote. If she was in many other states across the country, she could vote. But in Tennessee, their laws were just so convoluted that she didn't understand them. And then when she sought the explanation, this is what you want a reasonable person to do. You want a reasonable person to go and ask the Division of Parole and Probation, can I vote? You want them to have that sent to the Elections Commission. Can I vote? She gets the reassurance. She gets the letter indicating she can vote. She's okay. She goes to register, and she finds herself back in the pickle of being able to be charged and convicted with yet another crime. What we see here, and what this so clearly illustrates, is what felony disenfranchisement is all about. Not only does it do it to Pamela Mars, but it also sets it up to other people that are previously convicted felons, telling them, warning them, a chill to them. You don't want to get involved in this process, you'll go back to prison. That's what they're after. And what must happen is that we've got to have a standardized system so that people know when their rights to be able to vote are restored. There shouldn't be this guessing game. And particularly for Pamela Moses, it wasn't even a guessing game. She did what she's supposed to do. She asked the questions, she got the permission, and she finds herself in this position. I think this more than anything, and I know that Dr. Chavis will definitely speak to it. This more than anything illustrates A, the problem with felony disenfranchisement, B, the problem with judges that are not elected and able to be in a position to be able to say, I see the wrong in this, and I don't want to treat it, unfairly. You're absolutely right, Stacey, when you say that her sentence was more harsh. We know that in Ohio, we know that in Las Vegas, that we had white folks that were convicted of this and were given probation. I've represented a client here in Maryland who was convicted of this and given probation. So it varies in terms of the punishment, but more importantly, it's a suppressive tool. And if it is allowed to continue, my concern is that there are millions of African Americans that fall under this that will be impacted.
Well, we know that Pamela Moses is also a Black Lives Matter founder in Memphis, and her collision course with the justice system began there, and when she decided she wanted to run for mayor of Memphis in the summer of 2019. And so there's a lot going on here. Again, Barrington, I know you did a lot of digging into this case. How does all that tie in?
Well, it's what's really interesting to me is that I've just watched the way how folks who are social justice activists, members of Black Lives Matter, how since the worldwide marches and protests, the right wing police unions and all these other people have sought to change and to distort what it's really about. And so what has happened in a lot of cases is that the minute that these folks, people like Ms. Moses, put themselves out there as leaders in the movement, they do become targeted. And there have been cases of police departments surveilling Black Lives Matter activists, tapping their phones, doing all types of things to harass them and to try to get them caught up in the criminal justice system. So this is a part of this case that has, I think, a great deal of bearing. And again, Dr. Chavis can speak to that, because he's a survivor of the type of criminal tactics that law enforcement uses to try to entrap and imprison social justice activists.
Well,
Yeah.
Dr. Chavis?
Thank you. Well, again, I want to thank both of our guests. They're both right on target. Listen, Sister Moses is now a political prisoner. This has nothing to do with violation of a law. This is white supremacy taken to exponential power. And I think that the sentencing of Sister Moses was not just to sentence one Black woman or one person who has had prior trouble with the law to jail for voting. this is to tamp down voting of Black America, tamp down voting in communities of color. And they're using the criminal justice system to do it. Our attorney is right. This is going to have a paling effect on millions of persons of color who have had some prior altercation with the law, and their status is very uncertain. I think the United States Justice Department, Civil Rights Division, needs to look at this case. I think the judge should be disbarred. I'm going to say that again. The judge should not be practicing law. The judge should not be a judge. He should be disbarred for what he just did. It's not only a violation of Sister Moses' rights, it's a violation of the human rights of Black America. And I think that we need to start calling this out to the United Nations and to other places or forums where we can't get justice in America. We need to appeal to international bodies. That's what happened in the case of the Wilmington 10. And they were sentenced to 282 years in prison in North Carolina, which is right next door to Tennessee, back in 1972, because we dared to defend the rights of Black school children in Wilmington. And obviously, it took us a decade to fight back, to clear out sentences. Then another 30 years to get a pardon of innocence. It was a 40-year struggle. I think that we need to start calling out these cases and making the connection. This is not an isolated case in Memphis, Tennessee. This is symptomatic of white supremacy, symptomatic of voter suppression, and also symptomatic of what we have to do now in 2022. We got to push hard. We got to free this sister from prison, and we got to punish the people who were implicated and conspired to teach her a lesson because of her leadership of the Black Lives Movement in Memphis.
Yeah, and also Attorney Jones, this is, obviously Moses is not the first. Pamela Moses is not the first. There's a case pending now. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals finally agreed to review the illegal voting conviction of Crystal Mason. She's a Tarrant County resident who faces 5 years in prison for casting the provisional ballot in the 2016 election, while she was on supervised release for a federal conviction. The state's court of last resort for criminal matters is this court, and they granted Mason's appeal, her petition anyway, on late last year, elevating that profile of that high-profile case that could test the extent to which provisional ballots provide a safe harbor for voters. We know, again, that these voter suppression laws really want to get rid of things like provisional ballots. But here we have another case in which 5 years they have given this young Black woman for casting a provisional ballot.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And the Crystal Mason case was one of the ones that initially grew a lot of the national attention for what was happening there. Didn't know that she wasn't provided the information. But Texas is really bad on it, right? Because we also know that Texas has the Hervis Rogers case, the 60-year-old gentleman that stood in line for 6 hours to cast the ballot, and thinking he was doing the right thing, to find out later again that that he was on parole and was ineligible. And then Kim Paxton, the Attorney General there, then comes forward and says, "We're charging you. We're charging. We don't care if you knew. We don't care if it requires that it be a knowing thing. We're charging you." The whole emphasis there has been to put that focus on intimidating those that have been previously incarcerated, the returning citizens, try to stop them from exercising their vote because they believe they're not going to vote in the interest of those elected officials. And let me just add one other thing when we talk about Tennessee, right? Understand that in addition to what Tennessee has done with regards to this matter with Pamela Moses, they have pending more legislation. They have pending legislation right now that says they want people that are going to vote in person to have to use their fingerprint, to fingerprint them before they vote. Can you imagine adding that pressure, that chilling effect that you have coming from Pamela Moses to now saying we want to do your fingerprint too? And you don't think that this is suppressing the vote out of Tennessee and trying to keep that control. That's exactly what all of this is about. So whether it's Hervis Rogers in Texas, Crystal Mason in Texas, Pamela Moses in Tennessee, it's all unified for one thing, and that's to suppress that black vote. You know, Dr. Chavis brought something to my attention about a year or two back, and I have been saying it ever since. You know, in Vermont as well as in Maine, they have a universal right to vote. You do not lose your right to vote. If you're incarcerated, you do not lose your right to vote. It always stays with you. I don't understand why we as a country do not say, this is your right. You do not lose your right to vote. It is a universal right, and it always stays with you wherever you are. That would nullify everything that we're discussing right now.
Absolutely. Stacey Brown and I, a year or so ago, were in Africa monitoring the elections in Malawi. And we went to a situation where they allowed prisoners to vote while they're incarcerated in Malawi. Universal voting rights, universal human rights. That's why, Attorney Jones, I think we need to go after some of these people. I'm serious. We need to go after these judges. We need to go after these attorney generals. And I think we need to start using the law as not only as a weapon of defense, but offense. You know, this is a war that we're going through now on our voting rights. And 2022 is the year. If we don't turn around these voter suppression tactics, and this year, it's going to create a lot of harm for persons of color, communities of color in America as we go into 2023 and certainly 2024. This is the battleground right now. And I think these cases need to be fought. We need to do everything we can to free Sister Moses, and we need to do everything that we can to prevent the incarceration of our sister in Texas. These cases are, again, symptomatic of a system that's gone mad with racism, gone mad with white supremacy, gone mad with voter suppression.
And Barrington, I want to highlight a comment Paris Brown of the Baltimore Times brings out. She says of Pamela Moses, she says she's being used as an example to create fear. Your response, Barrington?
Yeah, it's interesting. I saw the letter that you guys put up. It said Shelby County, and it reminded me of the Shelby versus Holder case, which started the entire ball rolling of voter suppression. In 2013, the U.S. Supreme Court gutted two important provisions of the Voting Rights Act, which started this whole thing. No more pre-clearance. So that means that the federal government wouldn't be monitoring and making sure that the people, the municipalities and the states that had always been involved in stealing Black people's votes wouldn't continue to do that. That was removed. John Roberts, the Supreme Court Justice, has spent his entire legal career trying to destroy voting rights for Black people. And so it struck me when I saw that. And yes, what concerns me the most is that, I mean, in the last legislative session, the Republican-led legislatures introduced or passed, well, they introduced 500 bills. 34 bills have become law in, I think, 19 states. This, as Reverend Chavis said, these are some crazy white boys on steroids. They're doing everything they can: voter suppression, voter manipulation. And what makes me crazy is that the Biden administration is like 5 steps behind. The Justice Department is saying that they want to be involved, but they're so far behind what these guys are doing. And I honestly believe, I interviewed Bill Fletcher, veteran labor leader, like 5 years ago, and he said that what we are moving towards is an apartheid state with a white minority rule. And if what Donald Trump started in 2020 comes to pass, we'll never have a fair and just election again in this country. And that's my biggest fear.
Well, and Attorney Jones, your thoughts on Barrington's comments there about his fear?
Yeah, well, I think that his fear certainly is well placed. And as we monitor, as much as just yesterday, as we watched voting rights and the Voting Rights Act being taken apart, by the Supreme Court. This is just incredible. 2 days ago, I guess now, in Alabama, where the Supreme Court basically ruled that you can gerrymander the districts however you want and have a disparate impact on the minority vote. That's in essence what they have said. And so putting that in place and understanding that they're now going to be taking up affirmative action. So the concept is to really pull away all the voting rights protections that we've had, to pull away all the economic protections through affirmative action and education protection and societal protection through affirmative action that we had. That is the trajectory of the court right now. And some certainly would say, and Brother Barrington brought up the Shelby County, Alabama decision, that the author in that, of course, was Chief Judge Roberts. The dissenting voice, one of the dissenting voices in the Alabama redistricting case was Chief Roberts. So, the whole thing is and I say that to say that shows the progression to the right, how far off this court is going and beginning to try to really put their hands and hug this white supremacy mentality that has hit the parts of this country. So I think that his point is very well made.
Well, we continue to talk about voting rights, voter suppression. The Republican-led states like Texas, they continue to pass these laws and to, as we see here, Pamela Moses in Memphis, Tennessee, but the young lady in Texas, they continue to punish African Americans for voting. What next, Dr. Chavis?
Well, again, we have to translate our fears into a positive, proactive, constructive ground campaign. Listen to me very carefully. This is not the final chapter. We have to change this narrative. We have to get off from just being in defensive. And I want to really work with the Transformative Justice Coalition. Thank you, Attorney Jones, and for all the great work that the coalition continues to do. I really think we need to take these cases to the United Nations. Well, if the Justice Department is not going to be aggressive in defending the voting rights of African Americans, we cannot allow this conservative Supreme Court of the United States currently to be the last arbiter, to be the last interpreter, to be the final ruler of what happens to us. First of all, a human right, in my view, is stronger than even a constitutional right. And I think that we need to start arguing the human rights abuses that are going on against people of color. All this is because of the demographics is changing. We're becoming more and more a browning of America. And this is out of, you talk about what Black people are fearing. Actually, this white supremacy is because white people fear. They're losing their power, they're losing their grip, and they're going to do everything they can to suppress rather than having an affirmation embrace. The truth of the matter is, the more diversity we have in the democracy, the more stronger the democracy is. And I think that we need to start fighting for our democratic rights. I'm talking about with a small d, our human rights and our civil rights. They're all connected. And I think sometimes we allow these lower courts, these lower judges, and I'm very serious. We don't punish these prosecutors. We don't punish these judges. Mm-hmm. We don't punish these appellate judges. We need a way to punish people that are inflicting pain and misery on our community. And that's what I think that the Black press should be leading, Stacey, in 2022. We need a grassroots organizing campaign. I've thought about how we organize the Million Man March. We need to organize millions people's vote ground campaign in every precinct, in every city, in every state. We need to overwhelm the voting polls. Even if they put one poll in one county, we're gonna have 1 million people standing in line to vote, and we're not gonna leave until we have our rights respected.
Well, the good. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Barrington.
I was going to say the great thing about what I'm seeing is that groups like Black Votes Matter, New Georgia Project, Dr. Attorney Jones's group, they have not stepped back. They're in the trenches. They're fighting. they are making it clear that these white boys ain't gonna get no quarter, and that is the reason why Joe Biden is president. That's the reason why the Senate is 50-50, because the folks on the ground, the folks in the trenches, particularly in Georgia, they're the ones that transform this. I mean, I interviewed Nse Ufot of the New Georgia Project, and she was saying that they I think like 500,000 new voters, 2 million contacts with people that had not voted before, weren't interested in voting. So that's so this is just to jump on what Reverend Chambers is saying. We gotta be smart, we gotta be innovative, and we just gotta be resilient and
Right.
and persistent to fight against this madness.
Right.
Well,
And
thanks a whole
Stacey,
lot,
one last thing,
Barrington.
Barrington is absolutely right. We partner with, Black Voters Matter. We partner with the New Georgia Project. We partner with all of those organizations. We're not retreating. We're reloading. We're coming back, and we now have a national program that we're going to be rolling out that's focused completely on getting registration done for those that are returning citizens across the country. That's going to be its sole focus, to be certain that we can dot every I and cross every T, so we don't have these issues, these Crystal Mesa issues, these Pamela Moses issues that will be cropping up. And we'll be there with the National Bar Association. So what the Black lawyers, we got it across the board. And we look forward to also bringing NNPA on as a partner in that organization and that structure as well.
Well, Attorney Jones, hang out for a moment after we close. Our producer would love to chat with you further. The last word goes to Paris Brown of the Baltimore Times, who says Black people's right to vote is on trial. Thanks for joining us. Thank you for participating. We will see you tomorrow.